co-creator of Millennial Activists United. And Ashley, I want to start with you here. Charles Barkley, he said a lot. He called the people who rioted in Ferguson scumbags. Those were his words. He talked about police being necessary all over the country, and he talked about sometimes the attitudes within the African-American community about discussions of race. I'm wondering what you made of his comments.
I think he said it all when he said that you cannot judge one group of people based on one person's actions or comments. Therefore, I find it incredulous that people would try to gauge the black community by Charles Barkley's comments. He definitely does not speak for the community in which I exist. He definitely has not been to Ferguson. He has not reached out or spoken to protesters or organizers who are actively working to change our community and actively working to help heal after this trauma that we've experienced for the last 117 days. I think you'd also be hard-pressed to find anyone whose comments on this issue are less valid than Charles Barkley's.
Less valid? You seem upset by his comments.
I wouldn't say upset. I find it very curious that people are now wanting to comment on something that we have been experiencing for 117 days. And I find it very curious that people who want to comment on a socio-political climate that has occurred refuse to comment on why that actually happened. No one's commenting on the infringing of our civil liberties. No one's commenting on the fact that hundreds of people were rounded up and had their First Amendment rights violated, as well as other rights. No one's commenting on the responsibility of the police for the tear gas and the terror that they've been enacting upon our communities. No one's commenting on their violations of not wearing their name tags and not wearing their badges and refusing to identify who's head of command. And all people want to do is focus on burning buildings, and I find that just incredulous.
Joe, you've heard what Ashley has to say. You heard what Charles Barkley has to say. I wonder if you want to weigh in.
Well, I think it's interesting that Ashley seemed to think that Charles Barkley has no right to comment on what is actually a national conversation that spun out of the issues that took place in Ferguson. I'm right here in Los Angeles. We had, people protesting and marching right here, people interrupting traffic on freeways right here. So Charles Barkley had every right to make a comment about what he sees as the different kind of issues that are taking place spinning out of the killing of Michael Brown. I thought his comments, Charles Barkley is known to be a brutally honest guy. It might run counter to what Ashley and many people who have a racial orthodoxy would like to have him say and disagree with what he's saying. So it's a political disagreement here. She simply doesn't like what the man said because it doesn't, in fact, line up with what we hear. And when we hear Ashley saying, well, we got to understand all these things. Well, there are differing opinions about what, in fact, causes those conditions in places like Ferguson and Los Angeles and New York.
And Ashley, your very point it brings up a very fair point, is that even the four of us probably all have differing thoughts and differing opinions and different circumstances that led us to those opinions. It is a national discussion because, we all are watching what's happening in Ferguson. Ferguson is a mirror for many people of what's happening in their own communities.
Yeah, definitely so. And I'm glad that this conversation is happening now. And I think Charles Barkley is entirely right that we shouldn't wait until something tragic happens to have this conversation. But we definitely know that this is a nationwide problem. Like you said, this isn't just Ferguson. People are watching Ferguson particularly close because of the reaction of the state on people who are trying to peacefully protest and say we don't want to see any more black blood shed in the streets at those who are supposed to protect and serve us. But as we speak right now, we're waiting on a decision in the Eric Garner case. We also just saw not too long ago the officers who killed a 7-year-old child with military weapons, Aiyana Jones in Detroit, were just recently relieved from any repercussions for their actions. We've seen Darian Hunt's officers get a non-indictment. We're waiting on the case of Tamir Rice to see what that's going to turn into. So we know this is definitely not just about Michael Brown. We know this is not just about Ferguson. We know this is a national issue, and we know this is a conversation that needs to be had, and that there are going to be differing opinions that are brought to the table. But I think as long as we do it in a respectful manner, we'll all be okay.
Agreed.
Here.
We are down with that.
And for that, Joe Hicks and Ashley Yates,